for joining us. And let me bring up the various things that I need. On the one hand, virtual is kind of has some advantages, but shifting back and forth between screens is not one of them. So anyway, welcome to the Portland Public Schools Board School Improvement Bond Committee meeting of June 30th. We're starting just a couple minutes late, but we will try and get out of here at 6 o'clock today. And I'm just going to go ahead and we've got Chair Constam and Director Bailey on, who are the committee members. And then I also saw Director Moore was on here, and Director Brim Edwards as well. So thank you all for joining us. Let me jump back. Okay, so why don't we jump right into the, because introductions virtually are very challenging. So we've got the committee members here and board members here as well, and then a number of staff who are going to be talking and doing presentations, and BAC members as well. Let's go ahead and jump into the public comment if there is any. Kara, do we have any public comment? Anyone signed up today?
No.
Would anyone who is on the call, a member of the public, I suppose staff too, but let's member of the public be interested in giving public comment? If so, unmute yourself and let us know you're here. Give that just a second. Are there people called in, or would everybody be in the participant list, Karen?
I don't believe there's anybody from the public on the call, okay, but they would need to sign up first to be invited to join us.
Okay, well, yeah, got it. So, okay, then let's, and I don't think we had BAC meetings, but we don't have previous meeting minutes to acknowledge. Is that right, Kara? Or are you going to tell me we do? Okay, that's fine.
No.
Well,
I'm a couple meetings behind. That's what that look was.
But then sometimes also I say, and you're like, well, you're like, no, I sent those to you a couple days ago, and I'm like, oops, sorry, my bad.
No.
Okay. We will do that at the next meeting. Let's go ahead and jump into the meat of the agenda. Today we're going to talk about, we're going to get the Bond Accountability Committee Quarterly Report, the OSM Quarterly Report, and a Health and Safety Progress Report. And then if there is time, we'll talk a little bit about bond planning and engagement as well for moving forward. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Dan, and who might turn it over to the BAC.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, we'll just jump right in. Our first item is the Bond Accountability Committee Quarterly Update. And I do believe we have Kevin Spellman, who is the BAC chair, here tonight to present.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
I think I'm on my own here today, but I'll do the best I can, and I'll try to be as brief as possible, because I know you've got a lot to do and you've had the materials in your packet. Our most recent quarterly meeting was held on May 20th, which was a month later than our normal schedule. But as you know, things have been a little bit up in the air, shall we say, over the last few months, and really OSM was not prepared for our regular April date, and I'm not surprised, and there's nothing wrong with that. We did receive 2 pieces of written public comment at our meeting. We actually got them after the meeting because there was some confusion, but they both raised concerns about the proposed work at West Sylvan Middle School, and I think you're probably more familiar with that than we are, actually, because we had not been briefed in advance on that. They were concerned about the use of $2 million of Lincoln High School budget designated as swing sites being used at West Sylvan, and they thought for softball and baseball facilities, and they thought that was inappropriate use of bond funds. We got a briefing by email from staff, and we were assured that no bond funds will be used for new softball or baseball facilities, and that only a portion of the $2 million in question will be used at West Sylvan. Some will be used at other sites for athletic facilities. We've asked for a breakdown of that allocation, which I'm sure will be coming shortly. At the time of our report, PPS staff has a full plate. Construction work at Kellogg, construction work at Madison and Lincoln, punch list closeout at Grant High School, closeout at Roosevelt and design of phase 4 at Roosevelt, closeout at Franklin, multiple health and safety projects, and of course planning and design work for Benson High School and multiple pathways, and all in the context of a global pandemic. With regard to the 2012 bond program, closeout and final accounting are in various stages at Franklin, Roosevelt, and Grant High School. Some late cost issues have arisen at Grant, and they're under discussion with the contractor. We have subsequently received a copy of the closeout construction cost audit at Franklin. So I think that one can be put to bed, and we're waiting to hear about Roosevelt. The current cost projections in the 2012 bond program include funding for some ongoing work at Franklin and Roosevelt, and plus also at Grant. And the lessons learned on those schools have been passed along, of course, for the teams on upcoming projects. We've previously noted the final cost at Grant High School is substantially over the original budget, and even over the forecast at the start of construction, and that's been concerning to us at least. The district's performance auditors conducted a preliminary review of that history, and we were encouraging them to continue that as part of next year's work plan, although I just saw their draft work plan. It does not include this, and maybe it's just old news for their performance audit, which is kind of on a calendar basis. As you know, Oregon law provides that evaluations of CMGC projects are required at shortly after completion, and we're looking for a schedule from staff as to when we would see those for Franklin, Roosevelt, and Grant High School. In sum, after funding all of the additional work at these high schools and the entire 2012 bond program now shows projected final savings of $575,000. As you know, no surprise to anyone here, the 2017 bond program budget situation remains in the red, although it's improved substantially in the last quarter. Pretty well.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I did want to try to interject so that we could at least pause on that note about 2012, which in the whole scope of the project, $500,000 is pretty much right on the money. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And Amy, we've kind of tried to point out the cause for celebration on the 2012 bond several times, because it's not only within the allowed funds, but each of the opening dates were met, and that really was based on a 6-year-old construction schedule or design and construction schedule. So that's pretty remarkable, I think. And so everybody involved in that, from the board on down to the contractors and designers and OSM staff, are really to be congratulated on that success.
And phenomenal safety record as well.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. The 2017 bond program looks better in the last quarter, primarily due to the bond premium that was achieved. $68 million was secured in the last bond sale. And we made a note that I think is moot now. At the time of our meeting, that those dollars were being carried in the program budget, and we thought it should go directly to the shortfall at Benson, which really isn't a shortfall at Benson, as you know. It's related to other issues. And at least we haven't seen documentation that shows that, but all the documents we've seen concerning the 2020 proposed bond indicates that that has happened. So we're happy with that. After that is done, though, the entire program reports unfunded costs of $202 million. OSM reported that the large projects in construction are tracking within their approved budgets. There is some concern, I suppose, about that because things are in such a state of flux. OSM's learning to manage and collaborate remotely, as is everybody these days, as well as taking furlough days on top of all of that, and trying to deal with the whole COVID issue. Operational safety plans have been established at each of the sites. At the time of our meeting, there had been no reports of a confirmed infection on any of the projects. Challenges, though, from the pandemic include labor challenges, slowdowns from social distancing requirements. You can imagine how that might impact productivity, and supply chain disruptions. OSM, I think it's fair to say, was proactive in engaging with the contractors to identify and mitigate problems. But this is an ongoing issue, and we expect, and OSM has said we would get a fuller analysis of cost and schedule impacts at our July meeting, which is coming up. Work at Kellogg continues, and the project contingency remains healthy at this time, and everything looks like it's within the current budget. Schedule and budget remain key issues, of course, at Madison. There's really no schedule float remaining after delays, partly or largely from the permitting process. So any effect of COVID or anything else for that matter could be a problem. Staff told us that they and the contractors are working on mitigation options, and they're also thinking about what might happen if, or how they could deal with a delay that would cause late completion of that project, which would be a first, as we know. Schedule issues obviously affect the budget as well, and as we know from prior reports, that project started with a somewhat reduced project contingency. So we're looking for an updated status of that contingency and the completion at the July meeting. At Lincoln, the news is relatively good. The early earthwork, some of which was considered high risk, has been completed, and with little impact. We expect the building permit in August. I hope that we can reach that milestone. And as you know, the contractor's guaranteed maximum price has been agreed and approved by the board. We had some questions about how that fit in the project budget, and we're continuing to talk to staff about that. At Benson, the 50% design development cost estimates have been reconciled, and there's more value engineering ongoing. We didn't have time to look too much into the budget at our meeting, but we have subsequently looked at it in the context of the 2020 bond planning. And there are some relatively minor concerns, I guess, at this point. The contingency looks like it's a little less than standard, and the cost estimate seems to exceed the budget by a little bit, but they're continuing with value engineering. The master plan for the MPG building was approved by this committee, and I think probably by the board by now as well. We was a little surprised and regret that the district's current seismic standards were not adjusted as this master plan was completed to consider upgrading the seismic standards for that building, since it will be a new building funded by a future bond. And so we reiterate in our report our recommendation that the board should consider raising that standard. The current process has OSM receiving and a cost analysis of an upgraded standard at the end, I think, of schematic design, but really that's too late because the budget's approved, and at least now it's going to be funded, included in the 2020 bond, and if a premium is not included in that bond, then the decision is made without even considering. Health and safety work is in full swing.
Hey, Kevin, yeah.
Yes.
Just go ahead. I was going to ask a question. Go ahead, whoever is speaking.
Are you recommending the entire building be at the highest earthquake standard protection?
Well, we're recommending that it be considered, and so we should have be able to get a budget that would raise that standard for the entire building, and then the board could make a decision as to whether that's appropriate or not.
Okay.
So, Kevin, this is Andrew. Has the BAC, I guess I'm trying to get a little history here on this recommendation because I think it's a really important one. I'd like to have some more conversation about it. Have you had cost estimates on what it would take to go to, is it level 4? Am I getting that right?
Right.
In terms of making your recommendation?
No.
And I guess
we think that that's what should be a standard from the district at the time of master planning. There should be an analysis of what that premium would be.
So those are kind of two different things. I mean, having an analysis of what the premium should be and allowing that decision is different than saying it should be the standard. I'm raising this because I dealt with this a little bit at the city of Portland, and I muted myself. Sorry. This question came up particularly after the City Club report on seismic structuring, and then all the unreinforced masonry, et cetera. And I guess what I know, there are a lot of people essentially saying it's irresponsible not to build to that level. I know some of the cost estimates we saw on buildings at the city of Portland were astronomically expensive to go to that level. And the Portland building is the one that I remember. It's already a very expensive modernization, $200 million. Going to the next level of seismic, could have taken it to $300 or even $400 million because, again, existing building, driving pilings in and so forth. And I guess to me, there's a really important conversation to have here around cost benefit. And it's easy to say, well, of course we should be at level 4. And I think if I'm right, level 4 means that the building doesn't just stand up, that it would actually be inhabitable again, usable again after a very large earthquake. And I don't remember how large an earthquake. I don't remember if it goes to, in fact, if I recall correctly, architects are very reluctant to say whether it would be an 8 or an 8.5 or a 9. They're like, well, it would be, a higher level earthquake than before. But I think there's an opposite question of, if the cost of going there is so high that it actually eats up all your funding and you end up doing fewer modernizations and rebuilds, right, isn't there an argument that we actually are putting more students in harm's way? Say we only have funding to do one high school over the next 10 years, and then 2 high schools don't get any modernization versus 3 high schools getting modernization to a lower level. That feels like an important trade-off conversation to be having.
Absolutely, it is. But you have to realize, Andrew, that our recommendation is for new buildings only, and for the reasons you just stated. And our experience, obviously, we don't know what that premium would be for, say, MPG, just off the top of our head. But the experience of the members in our group is that for new buildings, that premium is not a substantial amount.
But I think we do know it roughly on a percentage basis because, Dan, we saw it for Lincoln High School. We saw that differential, didn't we? Even though we didn't formally consider where to go.
And for the conceptual master plans, Jefferson, Cleveland, and Wilson, we requested, and on the cost comparison document, we requested that our cost estimator provide, it's a high level, I think they took it as a percentage, I can't say that for certain, increase of what it would be per site, per option to increase that seismic level. And I mean, I think for every option, it's under $10 million, but it's not insignificant funds.
So, Dan, from a staff perspective, do you have questions or concerns about the BAC recommendation? Is this something that you, from OSM's perspective, think the district should be moving forward with?
Yeah, from a staff perspective, we have a standard, and what that standard is any modernization or new construction. So if it's a renovation work, that comes up to current code, of course, but also has an area that is within the building that is seismically structured to that level for immediate occupancy. Usually it's the gym, but sometimes the configuration, it might not be the gym, it might be the cafeteria area or something. But we have a space. And then we also, as part of our standards, we look at what some incremental costs would be to bring the rest of the structure up, or to add utilities come into immediate occupancy as well when it's not just on the structural side. So what would it cost to upgrade utilities? And so what we do is we look at that, and that's the standard doesn't include that. We look at to see if that's something we could afford within the budget. We have had the standard for several years. It came together as a number of staff reviewed the options, including our emergency management folks, who thought that this was the right use of funds, to have a space that we can use for after an earthquake with immediate occupancy, but not necessarily upgrading to the whole building, because it really is a trade-off conversation. The more funds that go to seismic for a new construction, those are funds that do not go elsewhere. And we have, as we know, lots of facility needs throughout the district.
So at this point, it sounds like you said for Cleveland, Wilson, and Jefferson, we have asked for that delta. For that, what that would be?
That is correct. So if the direction was to increase the budget to include that, or whatever the bond that goes forward, there's a specific number there. If we included that amount, we would include that additional scope.
Okay.
And Andrew, I just got a text from one of our members who knows more about this stuff than I do, and he says it's typically a 2% premium. And I looked at the conceptual master plan budgets, for instance, on Jefferson, and the seismic ad that's shown there is $6 million. And those are on 320 million, 333 million. So which is about 2%. So that's and those, well, I'll just leave it at that. That's
Great.
Rule of thumb, I guess, number.
Yeah. I would be interested, Dan, in having this as a agenda topic, probably at our next bond committee meeting, because I think we've got, just in terms of how we want to address this, and do we as a district want to adopt a different policy around it, and specifically, I'm thinking about if Jefferson moves forward in the 2020 bond, that there's a more immediate conversation about this. Cleveland and Wilson, we've got a little bit more time potentially, if they're not included. But particularly with Jefferson, I want to make sure we're teeing up this conversation.
No problem.
And,
Thanks,
and again, Andrew, MPG is also has some urgency.
Yes. And it would just be the MPG and not Benson, because Benson's not new construction?
Right.
Okay. Great. That's helpful. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. The health and safety work will be in full swing this summer at multiple sites. I won't go into all of that. I think you're getting an update elsewhere today. So other issues, the equity figures fell a little this last quarter to 16.55%, but there was some suggestion that some of the data, particularly at Madison, was incomplete. So we've asked to see that corrected data if that is a problem. Safety continues to be a good story. 227,000 hours have been worked at Madison with only one minor recordable accident. Neither Kellogg nor Lincoln have recordable accidents with 51,000 and 11,000 hours worked respectively. On our audits, mid-contract cost audit at Madison has been completed, and the performance auditor's year 2 report at the time was due on June 9th. I don't think it's been published yet, but I assume that will happen very promptly, and also assume that that will be presented to this committee. As you know, you asked the BAC to get involved in the 2020 bond planning exercise, at least in terms of looking at budgets, and we've had 2 lengthy meetings about that. The last one finished about 45 minutes ago. And I think we've tried to question the district. We've tried to challenge some of the thinking behind some of the assumptions, and to encourage some level of rethinking. And that's not to suggest that they're doing anything wrong. It's just a suggestion that maybe there's sometimes different perspectives that should be considered in coming up with final numbers. And we hope that the district will, I'm sure they will take our comments to heart and potentially make some adjustments of some magnitude, and then we would report back to this committee, I assume, maybe the full board, whatever your preference is, very shortly. In summary, everything looked like it's the projects are on schedule, on budget, but we should not minimize the fact that there are significant uncertainties coming out of this pandemic situation. OSM seems to be on top of those issues, but risks, frankly, remain high, and perhaps higher than they've been for several years now because of this situation. We expect an updated report in July, and we hope and have offered to be available to OSM folks if they need advice or counsel or ideas on how to deal with specifics. With that, I'll leave it to questions.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Do we have questions from committee members or board members?
Question for Dan, follow up from what Kevin mentioned. What's our risk? I guess if you're going to have a school not open on time, this may be the year that you actually get away with it. I don't know. What's the risk at Madison right now?
I don't know the answer to that, Scott. I think that's what we're expecting a report on in July. It wouldn't be this August. Madison is due to open August of 21.
The years are always confusing to me these days. It's like, what day is it? What year is it?
But obviously, this is a very significant issue. You know, Madison is needed for other reasons.
Yep.
And so we may be crying wolf, but we're just repeating what we heard, and we're reinforcing that this is something that everyone needs to take very seriously.
Well, then that's a little comforting that we have I was thinking, well, July, that's like a month before school starts. What the hell?
Right.
Oh, God. Anyway, Dan, can you give us a little more perspective, or should we just wait for July now that it's not 2 months before disaster might happen?
Yeah, I think I'll let, when Marina does the OSM report, I'll let her chime in. She's got a little more detail, but I think I appreciate Kevin's comments, because, you know, Madison always was the project that had the tightest schedule. And, you know, didn't have a lot of extra floated in. And then we had some permitting challenges, and then we were seeing some slowdowns with the COVID. So we're not trying to be alarmists. We're just trying to say, hey, you know, we see some challenges coming over a year out. We want to start talking about those now, and we want to start planning about those now. But here over the next month or so, we're hoping to have some more.
Okay, fair enough.
Other questions? And I do want to recognize, we were speaking at the beginning, but Nathaniel Shu, our student representative, has also joined us today. So feel free to chime in as well.
Great to see you, Nathaniel. Also, just want to thank the BAC again for the work that they're doing on reviewing the options for the 2020 bond. Just like us, they're working on a ridiculously tight timeline, and they just met before this call and are, as expected, approaching the task very seriously and diligently. So we're really grateful for that.
I guess one quick question. I think Kevin mentioned, I think this is for Dan or his team. Kevin mentioned that Benson might have a slightly smaller contingency than standard. Is that planned going into this?
I'll let Marina correct me too when she does her presentation, but all the projects start with a certain contingency level. Any modernization work starts at a 15%. And we try to consume as little bit of that during design as possible and save as much as we can for construction. We look at contingency every single month. Every month, all project teams have to report all sorts of different data, safety data, schedule data, cost data. And then that is provided to OSM. OSM leadership reviews that. We also look at our contingencies whenever we have new cost estimates, whenever we move through different design phases. So it's not uncommon for contingencies to fluctuate over time. You get a new cost estimate in, it's higher than what you had forecasted. Effectively, what that does is reduce your contingency. So what the teams then do is look at what the options are. Are there cost cutting, value engineering, or scope reduction options that we can go to increase that contingency? Or do we think we're at a risk level that we're okay proceeding with the lower contingency? Madison was a school that went into construction with a bit lower contingency than what we would shoot for, but we had a comfort level that we had identified the risks pretty well at that point in time. So we were comfortable moving into construction with a lower contingency without cutting scope at that time, but we're very careful to keep a close eye on those risks. We have risk logs, risk registries that we look at specific items, and as we move past those, whether in construction per schedule or some other information, we take those off our risk log. So it's something that's constantly looked at and not uncommon for it to fluctuate a little bit. But Benson is one that we are keeping a close eye on right now.
Great, thank you. Okay, any final questions?
I had a quick question.
Please.
I was wondering if it would be smart to increase the contingency on the 2020 bond for any new modernization by 1 or 2%, just because we are in this uncertain time.
That is a great question. And it may be smart to do that. That is one of the things that we're looking at. A little bit of context is we have multiple contingencies. Another way to say it is multiple ways to manage cost risk. One is a project contingency, and that's what we were talking about here specifically was a project contingency. A couple of other ways are escalation. So when we're looking at a project that's multiple years out, we assume a cost escalation rate per the number of years. And that's another component that when it's unclear what kind of market we're going into, we might increase the escalation percentage instead of the project contingency, but effectively they do the same thing. Similarly, we have individual projects. Those have individual contingencies. A group of projects is our total construction program. We have contingency that sits on the program level as well. That's also usually factored as a percentage of the total. And what that is able to backfill these additional unknown costs as they arise. So if we end up hitting some unexpected escalation, for example, that we don't have factored in, that program contingency is a bit of a backstop to help us address those unforeseen conditions. I hope that answers your question, Jackson.
Nathaniel, the Bond Accountability Committee, which just met, is considering this very question. They examined the question of what is the right level of escalation, which, as Dan explained, is a type of contingency, should be included in this bond. So that's part of the advice that they're going to bring forward to us.
Great. And I think that was Jackson that asked the question.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yep. But yes, great to have our student voices. Good. All right.
As Dan would say.
Yep. All right. Let's go ahead and move on. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin, for that report. Thanks for all the work the BAC is doing. More to come for sure. Next up is the OSM Quarterly Report. Dan and Marina.
Okay, I would like to invite Marina Cresswell, our Senior Director of OSM.
Thank you, Dan. I'm at this point, with Kevin having already done his report of some of the logistical details, most of what I can provide is color commentary, but I will provide that and maybe add some additional details along the way. With the 2012 bond, we are focusing on closing out our major CMGC contracts. I think, as you heard Kevin mention, one of the things that we need to do as we complete CMGC contracts is to complete an analysis of the alternative procurement. And that's a requirement by ORS. In order to do that, we have to actually close out the contract and complete the financial settlement of that contract. We did complete our settlement for the Franklin project in late spring, and we're working on our analysis right now. For Roosevelt, we have just worked with our construction auditor to complete our final cost closeout, and that will allow us to proceed with our accounting settlement. So that's the next step. Once we've completed that, we can begin the analysis on that one as well. And for Grant, we're not quite at that stage. It's a little bit further behind. We are working with the CMGC contractor on their final audit documentation and final change order reconciliation. For smaller projects, though, within the 2012 bond, there were some spin-offs from those modernization projects. The window rehabilitation at Roosevelt was one of the spin-off projects. We are moving forward with that. And in fact, if you've driven by Roosevelt lately, you'll see that there are plywood panels instead of windows visible from the street. That's because we are working on rehabilitating those windows. The bulk of that work is going to occur this spring before school reopens in the fall. There will be some additional work that occurs in the fall, but that has been closely coordinated with the staff at Roosevelt. Phase 4 has a contractor on board for summer work inside the building, and they are working on procurement of the contractor for the addition. So that work is proceeding forward as well. For Grant, we do have some small projects that are either being worked on currently or sort of in the wings as we get through the closeout of the costs with the major contract. Those projects are going to be funded by a modernization fund, so those are not additional to the budget that's already been set aside. We do also have the Grant upper field improvements that you may have known better previously as Grant Bowl. Consider this Grant Bowl Phase 1. So these are the improvements to the upper field to allow for softball. That work is in the process of getting the design team on board for design and construction, and I anticipate you'll see something coming up soon on your business agenda. As Kevin mentioned, the 2012 bond is projected to be roughly $600,000 under as of the May BAC financial reports. We have received some additional information on the audit of our OSM 1 program. That will take that number down a little bit. And just in general, as we move forward with the projects that are underway, we'll sharpen our pencil a little bit and start to get a better understanding of how much funding is left available for any potential additional costs for the grants, upper field improvements, or for Phase 4. 2017 bond. Probably the big story of 2017 bond was the sale of our last bond in April, the $68 million premium that added to our reports and was a good addition to the 2017 financials. We continue to review those 2017 financials to make sure we understand how much needs to be requested in the 2020 bond to complete the 2017 projects, working very closely, of course, with the BAC to do that. For the projects themselves, the big projects, Kellogg is on schedule and on budget. The work is progressing very well, and in fact, their anticipated completion is in spring of 2021. One thing that we like about that is that that gives us a little more time for operations staff to start the process of getting the school ready for opening in fall of 2021. Often with these projects, we are asking a lot of our operations staff, whether it's IT folks or it's maintenance and custodial staff, to really prepare the school in a short amount of time over the summer. This should give them a little more time and ease up a little bit, which is important because we have Madison right on the heels. Madison is currently also on schedule and on budget. As Kevin mentioned, we are watching a potential for Madison to have a delay. The potential at this point is just that. We are on schedule. We know that the schedule was tight to begin with delays in the permitting process. That certainly did take up quite a bit of the float. However, we watch closely against the schedule. The team works every day to identify places where they can regain some of that float. And the reason we have brought this up is because we understand that making that kind of delay occur at the last minute is a bad idea. And our intent is to start talking about a plan B as early as we possibly can to figure out all the potential logistical issues that need to be addressed so that we are prepared if we get to that. So we bring it up. We don't see that happening right now, but we are trying to keep it in our sights. We anticipate that we will be starting up with the transition team fairly soon. We did a similar process when we transitioned Grant out of Marshall and Madison into Marshall. That transition between two schools going in and out of the same swing site can be pretty tight, and there's a lot that goes on there, especially again with our operations department. We will be starting up with that transition team fairly soon to start talking about next summer. At the same time, we'll use that as an opportunity to talk through potential Plan B options. Lincoln is on budget, on schedule, moving forward. As you saw, the GMP was approved in May, and the construction has been proceeding forward. It is going well. Benson continues to move forward with design on schedule. The MPG master plan you saw recently. And I do want to note that while we have highlighted to the BAC that our contingency is not quite where we want it to be right now, those costs continue to be refined. As is typical during design, we reconcile cost estimates from the CMGC against the third-party cost estimator at the end of every design phase. And we do a fairly regular process of value engineering throughout the design as well. So we have, Dan says that we keep our eye on it. I think it would probably be more accurate to say that we spend several hours in meetings every week discussing budgets and value engineering for all of our projects, including Benson. Health and safety, last but certainly not least, it's actually quite large. We have a lot of work going on this summer. We have, to the best of our ability, taken advantage of the fact that schools have been closed early in order for us to start projects a little earlier than we would in a normal year. That is also because we understand that as schools come back in the fall, that there may be some additional time needed at the back end of the summer to address reentry into those schools with the new environmental conditions. And so we wanted to make sure that we had adequate time to complete our summer projects. As it turns out, we already had a fairly busy summer, so we have 10 or 11 asbestos projects currently occurring. We have a handful of roof projects, which are quite large as well. And fire alarm packages. We're working on multiple schools with multiple contractors throughout the summer and throughout the fall to complete our agreed upon scope of work with the fire marshal by December 31st of 2020. We do, of course, have other things going on with health and safety. That includes the security program. We continue to move forward with our security updates. Our water quality program is moving forward with implementing the new filtration systems. So they have been moving forward with design and bringing contractors on board to begin installation. And we continue to move forward on our lead paint abatement as well. So that's an ongoing project that will continue until essentially the funds run out. So it's been a fairly busy summer. I would like to just kind of briefly mention that we are in the middle of a pandemic, and while we are my team, I have been very proud of how well they are working remotely and how well they are addressing the impacts from the COVID-19. There are definitely impacts, and we have all of our contractors and all of our project teams have implemented COVID-specific site safety plans. They're all following those plans very diligently. We've seen varying impacts on our projects. It really depends quite a bit on the phase of construction that they're in, the trades that are involved, the types of materials that are being used. We've seen everything from labor inefficiencies to labor shortages to supply chain disruptions, but it's not consistent on all of those things across all of our projects. And so we have worked with each of our projects to look at them individually to identify the impacts. We've met with all of our active contractors to discuss those impacts and to figure out how we can help them move forward in a way that continues to be safe, efficient, and good for all of the parties involved. With the full project teams, I actually meet with those teams once a month to talk about our impacts from the pandemic so that we are constantly keeping our eye on what is occurring. And we are in the process of collecting to date all of the costs related to the pandemic on the major projects. We should have those in time to report those out to the BAC. But of course, there's a lot of unknowns coming up in the future. And so what we are doing currently is to get everybody at the table on a regular basis to say what's happening right now, what do we see coming down the pike, and how can we mitigate any potential impacts. That, I think, did I miss anything that I was supposed to address?
Andrew, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please. I was going to say thanks, Marina, for that update. Yeah, go ahead, Julia.
Hi, Marina. My question, well, just going to start by saying I appreciate your and the whole team's work during the pandemic. I know just from my professional life that's resulted in lots of adjustments to what would just be a normal construction project and a normal construction team. So I really appreciate the fact that the work's continued. My question, this is on the health and safety portion of the package. I think last time Dan had provided an update of the $150 million that was authorized in the 2017 package. 60 million had been spent, but so part of the response was 60 million, but we have a lot of projects scheduled this summer. So I'm curious whether we can predict what the number at the conclusion of the sort of the summer construction season, how much approximately we will have spent of the 150 in the health and safety and accessibility bucket.
So, and actually, Julie, I'm going to cut in for a second. I appreciate that conversation. The next agenda item is the health and safety progress report,
Perfect. Okay.
Which I think is going to go into that detail. Yeah. And
great.
specifically cover
my question for that.
Great.
Perfect.
No, it's good. It'll be a good segue. We'll get to it in a second. Other questions for Marina? I have one comment, but other questions for OSM?
More of a comment. Marina, again, thanks for your work, all the staff's work in these trying times. Even though I've been working at home for a number of years, my work life has gotten much more complex and challenging. And I can only imagine you guys trying to do a lot of stuff online is really difficult. Thanks for the clarification on Madison. So it's good to know things are on track. We're just talking contingency, what if. And that doesn't surprise, I was kind of surprised to hear that there might be an issue. So this is kind of what I was hearing before, that things are tight, but online, on time. So that's good. And just to clarify, so we were having in a security part of the health and safety report that's coming up. Okay, then I'll wait for that. But again, just thanks, and thanks for the clarification.
So just one comment, and then we'll go to the health and safety. Both Marina and Kevin mentioned the $68 million bond premium, and I just wanted to highlight that. We talked about it as a board after those bonds were sold. We are getting some questions about that, and I will tell you, I think those questions are misplaced. So I just want to sort of say on the record and make sure we're really clear about this, that we were able to achieve that bond premium because of the low interest rate environment, and we were able to sell the bonds that we sold and achieve that premium and stay within the tax rate that we had told voters that we would stay within for this entire bond program. And that $68 million premium is helping to deal with the shortfall with Benson and MPG and those projects. And there is a policy choice there. The policy choice would have been to essentially not accept the premium or to actually reduce the par amount that we are borrowing. What that would have done is it would have actually lowered tax rates a little bit lower than what we had expected them to be. But we would not have had that $68 million. So this next bond that we would have gone out with would have required us to find even more. So this is a real positive. It's a positive that you only get in certain interest rate environments that we happen to be in. It's reflective of the good credit that the district has. And I think it makes a lot of sense that we go down that road. So I just want to say thank you to Claire and her team for that bond sale. And I think this is a real positive for the district overall.
Yeah, that's the MPG building.
Yeah. Say again. I'm sorry.
I said that's at the cost of the MPG.
Oh, right.
Building.
Right.
So
right.
Great job by the staff.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Unless we built it to standard 4. Sorry.
Yeah. Right.
Come on, Scott. Don't ruin the moment.
More to come on that.
Bond humor there. Sorry.
Yeah.
But and totally agree with you, Andrew.
Okay, good. Let's transition to the health and safety and dive into those numbers in a little bit more detail. And I'm not sure who I turn it over to for that. All right.
That would be me. Sorry, I was trying to get myself unmuted. What we do have for the health and safety program update, I've provided a memo. It should be in the packets that you received. We wanted to show you how much we have completed or will be completing by the end of this year, and sort of how that measures up to the information that we provided to voters at the start of the 2017 bond as to how we anticipated spending those funds. And so if you're able to look at the memo, just kind of quickly to go through this, accessibility, we were hoping to do accessibility work on up to 9 schools. As of December of this year, we'll have completed work on 16, and we will still have funding, some funding left over to do additional work. For asbestos, that work is based on safety. We were hoping to do work on up to 48 schools. By December, we'll have touched 22 schools, though certainly the number of sites within those schools, the number of projects is more than 22. We've had some schools where we have done projects, multiple projects because of safety issues, and so we've been there for one summer, and then we come back the next summer and do another one, and so on. We will continue to move forward with asbestos mitigation work, and we do anticipate getting up to 48 schools by the time we complete our funding for asbestos. Fire sprinkler and fire alarms. As I mentioned previously, we have an IGA with the fire marshal to get all of Portland schools up to a minimum of code compliance consistent across all the schools within the district. We will complete that work by December of 2020. In fact, we're anticipating getting it done a little bit sooner, sometime earlier in the fall, though I don't want to give a date because you might hold me to that. So we'll say December per our agreement. And not only that, with the fire alarm, fire sprinkler work, we are actually going to be completing that work with less funds than we needed to. And that's one thing to point out to talk about later. The lead paint program, we will have completed 87 sites by December 2020. As I mentioned before, that work is ongoing. Those sites, similar to asbestos, that's based on safety prioritization, and we essentially go through schools often multiple times, depending on which priority we're working on at the time. So we have made it through all of our phase 1 priorities, and we are now starting to work through phase 2, and we'll just kind of keep going down the list from there. But we will have touched 87 sites by December. For radon, we tested all of the schools. We had 17 sites that needed radon mitigation projects, and those projects have been completed. There is ongoing testing that occurs for radon, and we will simply follow along as risk management continues with that testing. For the roof and seismic projects, so we say roof seismic. Seismic is related to the roofing level in these projects, and by December of 2020, we'll have completed 13 schools out of the 14 that we were hoping to get to. Talk a little bit more about that later. For security, initially the intent was to touch 11 schools. We will have touched 88 schools by the end of December. We are moving along quite well with that work. And for water quality, we will also have touched every one of the schools and brought those up to a minimal level of water quality in lead abatement. So with our project that was initially started as a pilot project to see if we could get all of our schools below 1 part per billion, as we presented to board members and BAC previously, we had significant success with that, and we're rolling that out to the rest of the schools so that we can get drinkable water at all of our schools at less than 1 part per billion lead. Now, as we talk through all of the work that we've completed, we do have changes in allocation of the funds. As I mentioned before, the fire alarm work was able to be completed $5 million under what we had initially set aside for it. For the roof and seismic projects, we need additional funding to complete up to those 14 schools, and we have reallocated that funding from the fire alarm category over to the roof and seismic to allow us to do that. The water quality program, due to the unique and creative solution that our team was able to come up with, we will actually be able to do that less than 1 part per billion and still do it significantly under the amount of funding that we had previously set aside for water quality. We will use some of that for the roof seismic work that we've got underway, but I think that it's a valuable discussion for us to have as we move forward as to how we reallocate within health and safety for those remaining funds. We're happy to bring that discussion back to the bond committee as we move a little bit further along in the program. I believe that is all that I really have to provide you. I did include in the memo a list of all of the sites that we have performed projects on for each of the categories to just kind of help you get a visual of that. We are working on an update to our website. One of the things that we've been working on with the GIS group is to develop an interactive map that identifies which projects have been done at which sites. That work is still underway, and with the impacts of COVID, our GIS group has been spending a lot of time working on reentry work as well, and we don't want to take away from that important work. So we're trying to clean it up and get it up on the website as soon as possible, but it's not there yet.
Great.
Any questions?
Yeah, Marina, just getting back to, and maybe I missed it if you said it, but to Julia's sort of overall question, do we have an estimate? I know you've got this table in the memo that sort of showed total estimated program costs of 134 million. Do we have an estimate of where we'll be at the end of this summer in terms of the total spending?
Specific to the end of the summer, I do not, but I can certainly get that information. We can do an estimate of that. These numbers are based on, basically what we will have completed for the scope of work we were set out to complete. And while a good portion of this will actually be completed by December of 2020, I would need to go and look at the specific projects and budgets to come up with that number. And I'm happy to do that to get us to a point to the end of the summer, but I'm not going to be able to pull it off the top of my head here.
Okay, sure. And then when did you say, when do we have the conversation then about, because again, the scope of work you have laid out here, it looks like, if I'm reading your table right, we're coming to an estimated program cost of 134 million. I actually don't know the language of the bond, but I think the bond might have said we'll spend at least 150 million. So do we come back then to have that discussion about the additional scope of work we can add?
I think it's fair for us to come back at the moment with the estimate that we'll still have an additional, roughly 11 or 12 million to spend. I think it's fair to have a discussion about which of the other health and safety project categories we want to prioritize. Certainly, the work is prioritized within those categories. The question then becomes, do we want to spend it all on roof projects? Do we want to allocate some of that to additional accessibility work? I think that's a fair discussion to have, and we're happy to bring it back.
Great, thank you. Julia, did that get at your question? Do you have additional questions?
It does. It just, I think, as we are going to be talking to the community about the next bond package. We just should need to be prepared to report on the health and safety portion of the package and be able to give an update. I'm glad to hear that there's a interactive map being updated with the projects. And like I said, I think we just, at least in a broad range of where we are in terms of delivering on the health and safety aspects from that 2017 project.
Great. Other questions?
Questions just on the that expenditure table. There's committed, there's spent. What's the difference? And does that make sense?
I'm not seeing where you've got.
Okay, I'm on the health and safety funding allocation final. And
Okay.
there's 5 columns. There's total funds, committed, spent to date. What is spent to date? Makes sense to me, and balance makes sense to me. What's committed mean?
Okay, so you're looking at the cost reports from that we provide to the BAC. So just to clarify, this is not from the memo, in case others were looking at the memo as I was. So the cost reports for health and safety, that committed amount identifies where we have contracts in place. And so those are funds that we have essentially encumbered for the contract, but we have not necessarily spent them. It's simply another way of looking at how much we anticipate spending in a particular project.
Well, that's what I was thinking, but the spent to date is more than the committed.
I'd have to probably pull up some to give you a better example, but it's simply another way of looking at the data. It's not a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of thing.
Yeah. What's this?
I'll just remind everyone to mute their phones.
Okay, so yeah, spent plus balance equals the total, and so I just didn't understand what committed meant, and it didn't seem to make sense with any of those. Anyway, that's the trouble with board members. You send us information and we ask questions. And we were having issues with the security with finding contractors. Has that loosened up now?
That has loosened up. We have a contractor on board for package 3, which was the last package that did not have a contractor yet. We are just in general on security. We're wrapping up completion of the schools in package 1. We expect to complete package 2 in September, and package 3 we are anticipating completing in October.
Awesome. Great. Glad that's happening. It'll be wrapped up reasonably soon.
Great. Other questions? Okay. Let's move on to the last or almost last item we had, bond planning and engagement update. I think we were just going to get a little sense of where we are and where we're headed. Again, most board members have been involved in these conversations. We've had a lot of meetings about planning for what comes next on a 2020 bond, and we're in the middle of a community survey, town hall engagement process. I'm not sure if this goes to Dan or Courtney or someone else.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, it's Courtney Westling, Government Relations Director. I will give a quick update and then I'm going to toss it over to Shanice to give a little more detail on the town hall that we just had last week to kind of recap and then share some more information about the focus groups coming up early next week. But as of today, I sent an email this afternoon. We have about 1,350 responses to the survey. That closes on Friday at 5. I'm hoping to get one more reminder in some capacity out before too long. We are in the field with the poll right now as we speak. So we'll get those details in time for the work session, which is scheduled on July 9th. That work session, as you know, is meant to kind of share out all of the various feedback we've received from the community in various places, town hall, survey, emails, and poll. So thank you all for participating last week in the town hall meeting, and I'm going to have Shanice share how that went and give a little bit of an update, or I guess a recap.
Good evening. Yes, we just last week on Thursday had our town hall, and I know many of you all participated. And we're able to really have multiple modes within this conversation to learn about the community's considerations and priorities as we're referring this bond renewal package to voters in November. And so we began the space by talking a little bit about the core framework that has been built and what scenarios or options would look like that kind of capture these areas of educational investments, health and safety, and school modernizations and rebuilds. And thinking about our vision and what this process really looks like as we create environments that build sense of belonging for all of our students. We thought we would continue our process of doing additional engagement with students of color, our Black and Native students, and Black and Native families. So there are a number of focus groups that will be happening in the next week, and we are connecting with students and families as we speak to kind of prepare them for that experience that will look very similarly to the town hall. And we will review this feedback and take a look at this more closely at the next board work session and onward. And so thank you all for your support and participation. And I look forward to continuing to look and see what community and students are thinking about as we process these options.
Thank you, Shanice. And I wanted to just also mention that kind of the next steps after the 9th. So you'll be presented with the information from all of these various touch points on the 9th, and then we will have a piece of the board meeting on the 14th for you all to decide and determine a final option, which could be it could be one of the 3 that are out there or tweaks to one of those options. So that's still to be determined, obviously, by you and based on what you're hearing. From there will be a meeting on July 28th, which is the last board meeting in July, where you'll vote to refer that option or some version of what you guys come up with. So I just wanted you to know those are sort of the 3 dates in July that are on your calendars. Trust me, we thought we were going to have to do 4, but we held back because that would just be cruel. But I think we can get it in and do it in those 3 meetings. So a work session on the 9th to analyze data, or pull it all together. A vote on an option on the 14th, and then a final referral vote on the 28th. There's still also an opportunity for folks to email us at schoolbond@pps.net. We've been getting some emails and responding with other options if people want to take the survey and just capturing all of those. So that'll be shared as well. But I just wanted to put that out there one more time for anyone who's hanging out with us tonight on the live stream. It is schoolbond@pps.net.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Shanice. Questions about the process, where we're headed, dates? It's going to be a busy few weeks. We wrap it up and get to a decision. We're all meetinged out, I think it sounds like. Good. Any other questions about overall the planning engagement? Okay, I am going to go. We've had something on our agenda for like 10 months now, and it is the discussion of the subcommittee charter, the bond committee charter, discuss expectations for drafting, review, and approval. And I am going to ask if Chair Constam is still on. I think she said she is. She's just on the phone now. I might need a little bit of a reminder. I know we had this discussion, or other board members can weigh in as well. I know we had a discussion about this at the very beginning of the year last year, and making sure committees had charters, but I kind of have forgotten where we left that and whether that's something that all committees are supposed to have.
I can't remember if we decided all committees were supposed to have, or if that was aspirational. The idea was to kind of set out a work plan and a plan for communicating what was going on in the committee back to the rest of the board on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to, so I think that it's an important conversation. I think with this committee, we've had very high board member attendance and then pretty regular updates and work sessions as well. So I don't want to task staff or board members with the time on this at this point. I do think it's a good question to come back to as we start a new school year in terms of how we want these committees to run as sort of maybe part of a broader board governance conversation, and whether this is something we still want to go through. So we'll put that on hold for now and take it off future agendas until it gets put back on. And then
I believe Nathaniel may have had a question, and just wanted to make sure we didn't miss that. Nathaniel, around the planning and engagement for the bond.
Yeah, can you hear me? Not sure if this is working.
Yeah,
we can.
Good. Yeah, somewhat related. It's just I've been out of the loop for the bond for about 2 to 3 weeks now, and I was just wondering if someone could give me a broad overview of which proposals are currently being considered, are still being considered.
Yeah, I can start and then staff can jump in as well. So at this point, and I think as Courtney just said, so we the options we've taken out to the community, and I'm going to get these numbers wrong. There's a $500 and something million package that would really just focus on a lot of the resiliency things we've been talking about, core curriculum, technology, et cetera, and would not have funding for a high school moving forward. And if we went out with that bond package, we would most likely be planning to come back in 2 years for a larger package that would include high schools. There is also I see, I'm getting confused also between the poll that's going out. There's also a $700 and something million package, which essentially would move forward. Sorry, I've totally blanked actually on because we also are going out with a poll. Yeah, jump in, save me, someone. Thanks.
I can send you the website link to where the options are listed, and then I'm happy to set up a phone call with you if you want to dive deep.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
I'm sorry. No, I should know this. It's just
Yeah, Nathaniel, if anybody should know it, I should. So you're all right. but yeah, and I think as Courtney said, right now we're hearing from the community their responses, and then we're not locked into those options. It's really just, I mean, it's essentially it's a resiliency bond. It's sort of a bond that would move 3 high schools forward, and then it's a bond that would include Jefferson, and with that, for Madison and Wilson. Are essentially where we are. But again, getting all the feedback, figuring out where the community priorities are, and then we'll make our final decision as a board.
Cleveland and Wilson.
What did I say?
I think you said Madison and Wilson, but maybe
Cleveland and Wilson.
Yeah.
No, you're probably right. It's been a long week, and it's only Tuesday.
Yeah.
The last item, just to note, not for discussion here, but we'll come back at our next meeting, is going to be the 2020-21 committee schedule. And I'm working with staff right now. We will likely go to monthly meetings, which we're doing. We were doing more frequently at the beginning of the year. But we'll come back at the next committee meeting to discuss the potential schedule and get that adopted moving forward. We got 5 minutes. Any final questions for staff or for board members? All right. With that, I will adjourn the bond committee meeting. Thanks for your time, everybody, and thanks for all the work from staff with the presentations today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew.